The voicemail came at 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzing like it had something to confess. I stared at the screen for a full minute before listening, my stomach already tightening because I knew that tone, my father's calm before impact voice. He only used it when he was about to take something from me. "Lena," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child who needed instructions repeated. "Your sister's wedding is in 6 weeks. You will be there. If you choose not to attend, don't bother asking about tuition next semester. Consider that my final word." The message ended without goodbye. No pause for questions. No room for breath. I sat up in my narrow dorm bed, the air smelling faintly of instant noodles and laundry detergent, and felt something inside me crack. Not loudly but deep, like a fracture you don't notice until you try to stand. Outside, campus was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually felt safe. That night it felt like isolation. My golden sister Ava. Even as a child, she had glittered in a way I never did. She was the miracle baby, the one born after miscarriages and prayers and a pastor's blessing. I was the accident who came later, the reminder that miracles lose their shine when they're repeated. Ava had been celebrated. I had been tolerated. She got piano lessons. I got hand-me-down notebooks with her name crossed out. She got praised for breathing. I got questioned for existing. And now she was getting a wedding that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. Destination venue, designer dress, curated guest list. A wedding my father expected me to attend like a prop, smiling on cue, proving to the world that our family was whole. The irony was sharp enough to hurt. Ava and I hadn't spoken properly in 3 years. The last time we did, she'd smiled that soft victorious smile and said, "Dad says you're too sensitive. You always make things about you." Then she'd taken my internship lead, one I'd worked months for, and somehow turned it into her own opportunity. No apology, no acknowledgement, just inheritance by favoritism. I replayed the voicemail again, just to be sure I hadn't imagined the threat. Cut tuition. My hands trembled as I locked my phone and pressed it to my chest. Tuition wasn't just money. It was survival. I was already working 2 part-time jobs. One shelving books in the library until midnight, another serving coffee to people who didn't look at my face. My scholarship covered half. The rest came from my father, delivered with conditions disguised as generosity. I told myself not to cry. Instead, I got dressed and went outside, wrapping my hoodie tight against the early morning chill. The stone paths were damp, reflecting yellow lamplight. I walked without direction, the voicemail looping in my head like a sentence I couldn't escape. "You will be there." I'd spent my whole life obeying. Being small. Being agreeable. I knew the role. Show up, sit quietly, clap when told, disappear when inconvenient. But something had changed recently, something fragile but stubborn. 3 weeks earlier, I'd nearly had a breakdown in the supply closet of the cafe. My manager had blamed me for a mistake I didn't make, yelling loud enough for customers to hear. I'd smiled, apologized, cleaned the spill, and then cried silently between stacks of paper cups. That night my therapist, paid for secretly out of my tips, had asked me a question that wouldn't leave me alone. "What do you think would happen if you stopped obeying?" At the time I laughed. Now, walking alone under flickering lights, the question felt dangerous. I stopped near the old fountain and sat on the edge, my breath fogging. Images of the wedding flooded my mind. Ava in white, my father beaming, my mother pretending everything was fine like she always did. And me, standing somewhere in the background, invisible unless needed. I imagined refusing. The thought sent a jolt through me. Fear first, then something else. Relief. But fear came roaring back fast. If he cut tuition, I'd lose housing. I'd have to drop out, maybe forever. All the sacrifices, the nights studying while Ava traveled, the years of swallowing bitterness. It would all be for nothing. That was how he kept control. He knew exactly where to press. By the time the sun began to rise, I'd made a decision. Not a final one, but a dangerous one. I would go to the wedding. But not the way they expected. Classes that day passed in a blur. I missed half a lecture, burned my hand on the coffee machine, ignored Ava's group text updates about floral arrangements and bridesmaid colors. Colors I was not included in. Apparently, I wasn't close enough for that honor, but close enough to fill a seat and validate the family image. That evening my father called again. This time I answered. "Good," he said immediately. "I assume you got my message." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "And I'll be there." He exhaled, satisfied. "That's the sensible choice." We hung up. He didn't ask how I was. He never did. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen, tired eyes, jaw set too tight, and whispered to myself, this isn't obedience. Strategy. Because what my father didn't know, what Ava couldn't imagine, was that I'd stopped being afraid of the truth. And weddings, I was learning, had a way of bringing buried things to the surface. As I turned off the light and lay back on my bed, my phone buzzed again. New message. From an unknown number. "Lena. We need to talk before the wedding. There are things you don't know." My heart slammed against my ribs as I stared at the screen, the glow illuminating my face in the dark. I had a terrible feeling that attending the wedding wasn't going to cost me my tuition, but something far more dangerous instead. I read the message at least 10 times, my thumb hovering over the screen like it might burn me if I touched it again. There are things you don't know. That sentence followed me everywhere. Into lectures, into the cafe, into my dreams. It echoed between espresso shots and library shelves, growing heavier with every unanswered question. Unknown number. No name. No explanation. Just a crack in the story I'd been forced to live inside. 2 days passed before I replied. "Who is this?" The response came almost instantly. Someone who was told to stay quiet for years. "Meet me. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. corner of Willow and Grant." My chest tightened. Willow and Grant was nowhere near campus. Residential. Older houses. People who had lived entire lives behind those doors. I almost didn't go. Almost told myself it was a prank, or some cruel coincidence. But something in me, the same part that had begun asking dangerous questions, refused to ignore it. The house was a pale blue duplex with a sagging porch and wind chimes that clinked softly as I stepped closer. The air smelled like rain and old leaves. I rang the bell once. A woman opened the door. She was maybe in her late 40s, hair streaked with gray, eyes too familiar to be a stranger. When she saw me, her breath caught like she'd been punched. "Oh," she whispered. "You look like her." My stomach dropped. "Like who?" She stepped aside without answering. "Come in, Lena." The fact that she knew my name made my skin prickle. Inside, the house was neat but heavy. Family photos lining the walls, framed certificates, a life carefully built. She gestured for me to sit, then took a moment herself, gripping the edge of the table like she needed grounding. "My name is Rachel," she said finally. "I used to work for your family." I frowned. "Work?" She nodded. "Housekeeper. Nanny. Whatever your father needed." I remembered fragments. Another woman in the background of my childhood. Someone who left suddenly. My parents never explained. Ava barely noticed. Rachel swallowed. "I wasn't supposed to contact you. Especially not now. But your sister's wedding. It's reopening things." My pulse thundered. "What things?" She reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside were photocopies. Old hospital documents, dates circled in red, a name written in shaky handwriting. Rachel Thompson, emergency contact. Next to it, infant Lena Carter. My breath left me in a rush. "Why is your name?" "Because I was there when you were born," she said softly. "And because your mother wasn't." The room tilted. She explained slowly, carefully, as if afraid I'd shatter. My mother had been hospitalized after complications during Ava's birth. Years later, when she became pregnant again, it wasn't planned, and it wasn't wanted. Rachel had been the one who stayed with me during those early months. Fed me, held me, loved me. There were discussions, she said, eyes glossy. About adoption. About giving you to my sister. Your father refused. He said it would look bad. That family stays family. But love. She shook her head. That was optional. My chest ached, a dull, spreading pain that suddenly explained everything. Why my mother never quite touched me the way she touched Ava. Why my father's pride skipped over me like a stone on water. I was paid to leave, Rachel continued, and warned not to interfere. But I kept copies. I couldn't just erase you. I didn't know what to say. Words felt too small. My whole life rearranged itself around a truth I'd never been allowed to see. Why tell me now? I whispered. Rachel's jaw tightened. Because your sister isn't just marrying anyone. She's marrying a man whose company is about to merge with your father's firm. A deal built on image. On legacy. She met my eyes. And you're part of that image. Whether they like it or not. I left the house shaking, the envelope clutched to my chest like proof that I wasn't crazy, that the neglect, the distance, the ache had a source. But knowledge didn't bring peace. It brought clarity. And clarity brought anger. The next week unraveled fast. My cafe manager cut my hours without explanation. My landlord emailed about a rent increase. And then my father called again. You'll be staying for the full wedding weekend, he said. Photos, rehearsal dinner, brunch. No disappearing. I have work, I said automatically. You'll make it work, he replied. Don't embarrass us. Something snapped then. Not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly. Like a thread finally pulled free. I won't be staying at the hotel, I said. Silence. What? I'll attend the ceremony, I continued, heart pounding. That's it. You don't get to set terms, he said coldly. Remember what's at stake. I looked at the envelope on my desk. At the name that had loved me when no one else did. I remember, I said. Do you? He hung up. 2 days later my tuition portal updated. Pending review. No explanation. Just a warning. Panic threatened to swallow me whole. I spent that night curled on my bed. The envelope open. Papers spread around me like evidence in a trial no one knew was coming. I cried until my chest hurt. Not just for money or school, but for the little girl who'd learned early that love came with rules. Then I did something I'd never done before. Emailed Ava. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg. I asked one question. Did you know? Her reply came the next morning. Know what? Don't make my wedding about you. I stared at the words, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. Course. Even now, truth was inconvenient. But the wedding was only days away, and I could feel it. Everything tightening, converging. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Especially not in rooms full of witnesses. As I packed my bag for the trip, slipping the envelope carefully between clothes, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Rachel. Be careful. If this comes out, they won't forgive you. I typed back with hands that no longer shook. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I was done surviving quietly. And as the bus pulled away from campus, carrying me toward a wedding built on silence and lies, I realized the real danger wasn't losing tuition. It was what would happen when the truth finally took its seat in the front row. The venue looked like a dream someone else was meant to live. White roses climbed stone arches, their scent thick and sweet in the late afternoon heat. Crystal glasses caught the sun like they were hungry for attention. Guests laughed in soft, expensive tones, dressed in colors that whispered money and certainty. This was Ava's world. Polished, curated, unquestioned. I arrived alone. No one greeted me at the entrance. No place card waited with my name. I stood for a moment just inside the gates, watching my father move through the crowd like a proud general, shaking hands, smiling the way he never smiled at home. My mother hovered near him, elegant and distant, her eyes skimming over me without recognition before sliding away. For a second, the old instinct rose in me, the urge to shrink, to disappear. Instead, I straightened my back. I took my seat in the third row. Close enough to be seen. Close enough to matter. Ava appeared soon after, radiant in white, laughter spilling easily from her lips as she embraced friends and future in-laws. When she finally noticed me, her smile faltered. Just a fraction of a second. Enough. She leaned toward me, voice low. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said. I told Dad I would, I replied. Her eyes hardened. Please don't do anything dramatic today. I met her gaze calm. I won't. I promise. That at least was true. The ceremony began. Music swelled. Everyone stood. As Ava walked down the aisle, my father wiped a proud tear from his eye. Cameras flashed. The officiant spoke about love, sacrifice, and family, the words floating above us like decorations, beautiful and hollow. Then came the part one hadn't expected. Before we exchange vows, the officiant said warmly, the bride and groom have chosen to honor family by inviting a few words from loved ones. My father turned slightly, scanning the crowd with satisfaction. And first, the officiant continued, the bride's parents. My father stood, smoothing his jacket, already glowing. But Ava raised a hand. Actually, she said, her voice sweet and rehearsed, we thought it would be meaningful if my sister spoke first. Lena. The world seemed to inhale. I looked up slowly. Ava's eyes glittered, not kindly. This wasn't an honor. It was a trap. Test. Put the quiet one on the spot. Make her freeze. Prove she belonged in the background. My father's head snapped toward me, warning etched into his stare. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. Instead I stood. The microphone felt heavy in my hand as I walked forward, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I could smell the roses, feel the sun on my skin, see dozens of expectant faces. This was the moment they thought they controlled. Took a breath. I wasn't prepared to speak today. I began, my voice steady despite the tremor inside me. But maybe that's fitting. I've spent most of my life unprepared for the roles assigned to me. A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the crowd. I grew up believing family was something you earned by being quiet, by being useful, by not asking for too much. I believed love was conditional. And for a long time I thought that was my fault. My father shifted in his seat. My mother's lips pressed thin. I continued, the words flowing now, no longer afraid. But I learned recently that sometimes, the problem isn't that you're too much. It's that others needed you to be less. The air changed. People leaned in. I want to congratulate my sister, I said, turning to Ava. Not just on her wedding, but on her ability to always land on her feet. Some people are born with that gift. Ava's smile was frozen. And I want to thank my parents, I added, looking directly at them, for teaching me resilience, for showing me what survival looks like when affection is scarce. A murmur rippled through the rows. I didn't reveal documents. I didn't name secrets. I didn't need to. The truth sat between the lines, undeniable. I'm still in school, I finished softly. Still building a life that belongs to me. And today I choose to be here. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, but because I finally understand my worth. I set the microphone down. Silence. Then scattered applause. Polite at first. Then stronger. Real. I returned to my seat without looking at anyone. The ceremony resumed, but something had shifted. My father didn't smile as brightly. Eva avoided my eyes. The perfect picture had cracked, just enough to let light in. Afterward, at the reception, I didn't stay long. I declined champagne, ignored whispers, walked past my parents without waiting for permission. My father followed me outside, his voice sharp. What was that? That was honesty, I said. You embarrassed us. I met his gaze, feeling something settle inside me. No. I stopped covering for you. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had nothing to threaten me with. The next morning, an email arrived. Tuition approved. Full semester. No conditions. No apology. No explanation. I stared at the screen, then laughed. Soft, incredulous, free. Weeks later, I moved into a smaller apartment closer to campus. Picked up more shifts. Kept seeing my therapist. I called Rachel and thanked her, not just for the truth, But for loving me when it mattered most. Ava never reached out. My parents sent a generic holiday card. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't hurt. Because it wasn't empty anymore. It was mine.